Welcome to
Theories
of the third kind.
Welcome to Theories of the Third Kind. My name is Aaron. The other host that is joining me today is Danielson.
Hello.
Now, before we start today's episode, we do have a quick announcement to make.
If you would like to support the show, you can do so by joining our premium subscription service, Supercast. For just $6.66 a month, you can enjoy weekly premium audio episodes that are all ad-free and have access to our entire back catalog of
260 plus premium episodes that are also ad-free.
so many.
Or if you want to, you can be a big baller and sign up to our premium video service where you get a extra video episode each week for only $9.99 a month. And you can sign up to that by going to our website, theoriesofthethird.com. Right there in the middle of our website, it's going to be a Supercast button. You click on it. It'll take you over. You can choose between the audio only membership or the video and audio. So you get all that for $9.99 a month. You could sign up. No pressure. If you don't want to, it's okay.
Now, we know things are tough out there right now, so if you can't afford a premium membership, but you still want to help us out, you could do so by leaving us a rent review on iTunes or Spotify.
That helps us out a lot.
However, don't feel pressure to leave us one. If you don't want to, then that's fine. We just want you guys, girls, aliens, reptilians, Bigfoot, Sasquatches, Chupacabras, ghosts, Illuminati members, underground lizard people, whoever or whatever you are, to enjoy the show. And also, remember, our episode is entirely human-made. No AI were harmed or used in the process other than for the base graphic.
And that is the end of the announcements. So today is June 19th, and it is a federal holiday in the United States, which is celebrated annually to commemorate the ending of slavery in the United States. And we figured, why not do an episode over slavery? To tell you the history of slavery, slavery in the United States, and then go into the strange facts and findings that we uncovered while researching this topic, and then end it all with the theories and our own personal thoughts behind today's episode. So with that being said, Dan, can you tell us the history of slavery?
Absolutely. Now, I want everyone to gather around, get ready for Daniel and Aaron's history class.
Sit down, bitch.
That's right.
Respectfully.
I love you. Okay, so I want everyone in class to close their eyes and picture this. It's around 3500 BC. We are in ancient Mesopotamia. It's hot as hell outside, and you are standing in mud.
It is here where the earliest records of human slavery were found. Etched into the clay tablets were lists of humans as property.
So needless to say, slavery wasn't an invention of the modern world. It's older than money, older than empires, older even than written language. It emerged almost as soon as humans settled down and started building civilizations.
In those ancient lands, Mesopotamia, Babylon, and Egypt, slavery was simply part of the fabric of life. But where did these first slaves come from? Well, mostly they were prisoners of war. You lose a battle, you lose your freedom. You became a trophy, pretty much a resource.
In that sense, trophy wasn't good.
No.
It's like a participation trophy. Please
Slavery.
However, that was not the only way you became a slave. Debt was another, pathway to becoming a slave. Let's say you borrowed too much grain and you failed to repay your debt. This would lead you and your family being forced into bondage, and not the freaky good kind of bondage either. I mean, to each their own. This type of bondage is pretty much slavery.
Think of the pyramids of Egypt, monuments of ambition built by the sweat of captives hauling massive stones under a relentless sun. The pharaohs there would routinely claim thousands of slaves as spoils of a recent conquest in order to replenish his workers who had died. This story of slavery unfolded all around the world.
For example, ancient Greece, often celebrated as the birthplace of democracy, was built on slave labor. In Athens, nearly 1/3 of the population was enslaved. A random knowledge nuggets for you third kinders. But the famous philosopher Aristotle, his bitch ass, stated that slaves were living tools and that some people were born to be natural slaves. I'm gonna whip your ass, Aristotle.
All right, let's fast forward to Rome. They decided to take the Greek model of slavery and scale that bitch up to industrial levels. They would go into wars, capturing enemies, turning them into slaves so that they could build shit.
Millions. Yes, millions of slaves in Rome built aqueducts, fought and died as gladiators for entertainment, served wealthy senators, and mined silver in Spain under conditions so brutal they killed men faster than battle.
And this wasn't just happening in Rome. If you went to ancient India, you would see that they had a system in place that held millions of people in hereditary bondage. AKA, if you were born into slavery, you pretty much stayed there.
China's powerful dynasties used labor and enslaved war captives to build colossal projects like the Great Wall of China. Slavery was flourishing all over the world.
From its earliest days across continents, humanity forged chains, different in design but similar in its purpose. War, debt, punishment, and the cruel accident of birth became the grim factories producing human property.
For centuries, slavery wasn't primarily defined by skin color. In some places, like Rome, a slave could sometimes earn freedom and even citizenship. But the core reality was brutal. A human being was property, bought, sold, bred, and used.
Then came a shift. As Christianity spread across Europe, the church began to draw moral lines. Enslaving fellow Christians became increasingly taboo. So when Europe exploded into the age of exploration, sailing to new worlds, they decided to look elsewhere for labor. Their gaze fell upon Africa. They weren't seeking sinners, they were seeking souls they could claim as property, justifying it through emerging ideas of racial inferiority.
All right, let's fast forward to the year 1492. Christopher Columbus lands in the Americas, a new world that quickly became a nightmare for millions. The Spanish and the Portuguese, desperate for gold and sugar, first enslaved the indigenous Arawak and the Carib peoples. Disease and brutal labor decimated these populations.
So, what did the colonizers do to get more slaves? They decided to look across the Atlantic to Africa. And this set the stage for a horror unlike any other: the transatlantic slave trade.
This transatlantic slave trade wasn't just slavery, it was a meticulously engineered, continent spanning machine of exploitation and terror, with its roots uniquely driven by race. And it would be these roots that would spread deep within the United States.
And it all started in 1619. A ship arrived in the British colony of Jamestown, Virginia. Now, originally, this ship was carrying 20 enslaved Africans, but they really weren't enslaved, but they kind of were. They were taken captive because this ship was just just sailing around. And then it got into a fight with a Spanish ship, which was carrying these 20 enslaved Africans. It pretty much destroyed that ship, took the 20 enslaved Africans hostage, and then it docked in Jamestown to pretty much have ship repairs done on its ship to get more food and other materials so that they could sell back home. And they needed to trade to get the ship repairs and food. So they traded the 20 Africans and they became servants who could eventually earn their freedom. But this planted the seed. These 20 Africans were the start of slavery in the United States.
By the mid 1600s, the gears locked into place. Colonial laws began defining slavery explicitly by race and making it permanent and hereditary. For example, in 1662, Virginia passed a law called Partis Sequitur Ventrum, which stated that a child's status followed the mother. This meant that if the mother was enslaved, then the child was enslaved forever as well.
2 years later, in 1664, the state of Maryland declared that baptism did not grant freedom. The chain of slavery became unbreakable across generations. Laws systematically stripped African Americans, whether they were enslaved or free, of rights and identity. Marriage between enslaved people had no legal standing in the United States. They were now property, not people.
The 1700s saw the engine of slavery roar to monstrous life. Demand for tobacco, rice, indigo, and later cotton exploded. European forts became grim processing centers along the West African coast. African kingdoms and traders participated fiercely, waging wars specifically to capture prisoners for sale.
Yep. And these prisoners would be taken upon ships over there in Africa and sailed across the Atlantic over to the United States. And hundreds of these slaves were packed like cargo in the filthy holds of slave ships, their bodies crammed side by side, chained together. Disease, suffocation, suicide, and despair were constant companions. Millions died during these voyages, and those who survived faced the dehumanizing spectacle of being placed on the auction block in ports like Charleston, New Orleans, and Havana.
Then the American South became the domain of King Cotton. By the late 1700s, slavery was the absolute bedrock of the Southern economy. The invention of the cotton gin by Eli Whitney in 1793 made short, stable cotton wildly profitable, sucking the South into an even deeper dependence on enslaved labor.
The landscape transformed into vast plantations ruled by a small minority of wealthy individuals. These plantations were worked by gangs of enslaved people under the constant threat of the overseers' lashings. Families were routinely ripped apart on the auction block with terrifying casualness, and enslaved women lived under the constant threat of sexual abuse with no legal recourse.
Then you had runaways who were faced with mutilation or death. Southern newspapers overflowed with ads seeking runaway slaves. These weren't just descriptions, they included matter of fact listings of branding marks, initials, or symbols burned into their flesh. If you saw a slave with an R burned into their flesh, it meant for runaway. If you saw one with the letter M burned into their flesh, it means they were a murderer. Humans were reduced to tracked inventory, like cattle.
And enslavers, the slave owners, meticulously calculated the market value of human beings, insuring them like livestock or buildings. Yes, insuring them, placing insurance policies on them. Policies listed them alongside horses and barns. A prime field hand, which was a prime slave, might be insured for $1,000 in the 1850s, which was a fortune.
If an enslaved person was killed by an overseer, the insurance company might sue the killer, but they wouldn't sue them for murder. The killer would be sued for damaging valuable property. Companies like Aetna and New York Life, and even Lloyd's of London,
They profited off this. Yeah.
they profited off of this shit.
And they're still around to this day. But don't be fooled, though. The North, they were just as bad. Northern merchants, they bankrolled these slave ships to bring more slaves over. Northern factories, like those in Massachusetts, consumed Southern cotton by the tons. Northern insurance companies insured enslaved lives. Northern financiers on Wall Street, whose foundations were literally built with slave labor, they profited immensely. The entire nation was entangled in this sin.
And here's a little knowledge nugget for you. Y'all know Thomas Jefferson. He was one of the founding fathers of America and the third president of the United States from 1801 to 1809. Well, get this. On the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson wrote the phrase, "All men are created equal."
This phrase signified that all individuals were born with inherent equal rights, specifically life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, apparently Thomas either didn't believe that or changed his mind, because in his lifetime, his bitch ass owned over 600 slaves and freed only a handful of them.
So technically to him, slaves weren't people. They were still property.
Oh, yeah.
Also, Thomas Jefferson owned a nail factory that enslaved children between the ages of 10 to 16 years old and forced them to produce thousands of nails every day under the threat of whipping or reduced food rations if they fell short.
So, needless to say, the American Revolution promised liberty, but left most enslaved people in chains. The Constitution tiptoed around the issue, protecting slavery through compromises like counting enslaved people as 3/5 of a person for political representation.
I remember that from The Patriot.
Yeah.
Then in 1857, the United States Supreme Court made a landmark ruling that declared African Americans, whether enslaved or free, were not United States citizens and therefore could not sue in federal court. The Supreme Court also ruled that Congress lacked the power to ban slavery in U.S. territories.
And shortly after that, in 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected. The southern states began to fear that the end of slavery was coming, so they seceded from the United States, and due to this, in 1861, the Civil War erupted.
2 years later, in 1863, Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation declared freedom for the slaves in Confederate states as a war measure. However, nationwide legal freedom came only with the ratification of the 13th Amendment in 1865.
But freedom wasn't instant for all. The last known enslaved people in the U.S. were on the coast of Texas. News of emancipation didn't reach them until June 19th, 1865, over 2 months after the war ended. And this day is now celebrated as Juneteenth, June 19th, the end of slavery.
So, needless to say, slavery's shadow stretches all across the world throughout thousands of years. The chains forged in ancient Mesopotamia, tightened on the Middle Passage, and hammered into law in colonial America. It left deep scars on individuals, families, nations, and the very concept of human equality.
But the story of slavery is, ultimately, a stark reminder of the depths of human cruelty, but also of the unbreakable human spirit that resisted, survived, and continues to fight for freedom. And that right there is the history of slavery, not only around the world, but also in the United States, summarized as best as we could. And I know that there is a lot that we left out, but we are not finished with today's episode, because now we are going to get into the strange facts and findings that we uncovered while researching this topic.
Our first strange fact and finding is about slave tags. In cities like Charleston, enslaved people hired out by their masters had to wear metal tags around their necks, stamped with a number and the year, proving they were licensed to work for someone else. They were a visible brand of ownership.
Did you know about that? I had no clue about slave tags.
I learned about that in Django, I think.
Oh. Nice. Thank you, Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, because I think they involved that in there for one slave to go to another plantation to work.
Mm-hmm.
They had to have like a tag or something.
Candyland.
Yeah, Candyland. Mr. Candy.
All right. So our next strange fact is called gradual freedom. Some northern states abolished slavery not outright, but through gradual emancipation laws. These often declared children born to enslaved mothers after a certain date. These children would be free, but only after serving their mother's master for 20 to 30 years. Freedom delayed was freedom effectively denied for a generation.
So a kid had to work 20 to 30 years before they would be free.
Yeah, fucked up.
Not as fucked up as this next one. Our next strange fact and finding is called breeding. While debated, substantial evidence shows that some enslavers, especially after the international slave trade to the U.S. ended in 1808, actively encouraged or forced reproduction among enslaved people to increase their stock, treating human beings like livestock managed for profit.
I kind of knew about that. I heard about that in school during history class.
I remember you brought up some statistics about that when they stopped doing the slave trading,
Mm-hmm.
and then they started just doing this breeding, how the numbers skyrocketed.
Yep.
It's insane, the numbers.
Yeah, because in history, what we didn't mention is that the United States banned the transatlantic slave trade, meaning that you couldn't take a ship and sell it over to Africa, get slaves, and bring them back over to the United States. They banned that before they made it, slavery in general banned completely. So everyone that was over here currently could be the only ones that you could get as slaves. And it was at that point that slavery skyrocketed in the United States and went from like a couple 100,000 to like 4 to 5 million individuals. Also, another thing that we didn't talk about is that Christopher Columbus and a lot of the other first colonizers tried to take the natives that were here and enslave them, but they couldn't, because these natives, they already knew the land. They could escape. They had horses. They were very good at like resisting. Some of them were used as slaves, but it wasn't really effective as, you know, getting someone off a slave, a slave boat or something.
I remember reading about Christopher Columbus from his journal, I believe it was, that he pretty much made the native tribes believe that he was like a god
Yeah.
and all that to put fear into them to try to take control of them.
Mm-hmm. Another thing too is by the 1800s, a lot of these slaves, they were fourth to fifth generations. It wasn't like first or second generation slaves. These were fourth to fifth generation slaves in the 1800s. And in the Caribbean, they were way freaking worse with their slaves. They were running through their slaves by the millions because they would constantly die. So a lot of them, a high percentage of them, were first generation slaves because they would constantly keep dying. They would just keep bringing them over and over and over. It was messed up. All right, so let's talk about our next strange fact and finding, which is called flipping. So the colony of Georgia initially banned slavery in 1735, only to reverse the ban less than 2 decades later in 1750 under the planter pressure, meaning like the plantation owners. They were like, hey, we don't have anybody to run our plantations, no workers. So Georgia was like, okay, well, we'll make slavery legal again. Yeah. But Spain's 1541 new laws, which is called Leyes Nuevas, prohibited enslaving Native Americans. And this was in 1541, but did not extend that protection to Africans, which this pretty much cemented the racial shift in Americas, going from the natives or trying to enslave the natives, which they didn't do successfully, to saying, okay, let's transfer over to the Africans and enslave them.
Now, our last strange fact and finding is called modern day slavery. So, as we were researching this document, we were wanting to see how many places around the world still enslaved other human beings. And this is what we found.
Slavery is illegal in every country in the modern world. However, while slavery itself may have been legally abolished in all nations, in many countries it hasn't been explicitly criminalized. In 94 countries, a person cannot be prosecuted for enslaving another human being.
Modern slavery can be difficult to detect and recognize in many cases. This is because slavery has moved underground in most countries and because the definition of slavery has expanded and evolved over the past several decades.
Forms of modern slavery include slavery by ownership, forced military service or government labor, forced prison labor, forced migrant labor, debt bondage, which is slavery until the debt or debts are paid, sexual slavery, forced marriage or child marriage, child labor, and forced begging. So yeah, those are the forms of modern slavery. So we have the top 10 countries with the highest prevalence of modern slavery by total numbers of slaves. And this is according to the Global Slavery Index in 2018. India is number one with over 11 million slaves. China is number two with 5.7 million slaves. So India is leading the world in slavery. North Korea has 2.6 million slaves. Pakistan has 2.3 million. Russia has almost 1.9 million. Indonesia has 1.8 million. Nigeria has 1.6 million. Turkey has 1.3 million. Bangladesh has 1.1 million. And coming in at number 10 is the United States with almost 1.1 million slaves.
So, India has the highest number of slaves in the world. This is partly because India is one of the 2 most populous countries on earth, and partially because all forms of modern slavery exist in India, including forced child labor, forced marriage, commercial sexual exploitation, bonded labor, and forced recruitment into armed groups.
China, the Earth's most populous country, has the second highest number of slaves at more than 3.8 million, which the global index states at 5.7 million. And other countries with significantly high slave populations, like we said, are Russia, Nigeria, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Indonesia, Egypt, Iran, Turkey, and Sudan, just to name a few. On a continental level, Asia has not only the highest overall population, but also the highest total number of slaves. So there you go. Coney 2012.
Coney 2012.
You remember that?
I remember that. Didn't you have a shirt?
I did have a Coney 2012 shirt. I was duped by that. I supported it, donated money, and got the shirt and the pins and all that stuff. Coney 2012. What was that again? Wasn't it like Coney 2012? Let's look that up. 2012 short documentary film produced by Invisible Children. Purpose was to make Uganda cult leader, war criminal, and fugitive Joseph Kony globally known, to have him arrested by the end of 2012. It spread virally. As of June of 2024, the film has over 103 million views. The film plans to capture Joseph Kony. He's a part of the rebel militia group Lord's Resistant Army, LRA, and forced recruitment of child soldiers in South Sudan, Congo, Uganda, where they are active. Wasn't it like fake?
The nonprofit that ran the viral campaign, Coney 2012, Invisible Children Inc., was accused of using the money donated to line their own pockets. They were also accused of misrepresenting or at least oversimplifying the facts. In 2012, the co-founder, Jason Russell, was taken into custody by San Diego Police Department for being drunk, vandalizing cars, and masturbating in public.
Wait, what? He was jerking it in public?
Jerking in public. An unconfirmed mobile video footage allegedly showing Russell naked in the middle of a street was posted via TMZ. Afterwards, people started posting memes with Russell's face on it.
Well, shouldn't jerk it in public, dude. It's not cool.
You're glossing over the important fact that Kony was no longer in Uganda before the video was even filmed and hadn't been there for years.
Oh, well. Anyway, so that right there is the end of our strange facts and findings. Now we are going to get into our theories. Our first theory is called the economic engine theory, and this is the most straightforward one. It states that slavery was immensely, undeniably profitable. Labor was free after you purchased the slave. It was forced and uncompensated, meaning that you didn't have to pay your slave. You just had to feed them and house them and clothe them if you wanted them to wear clothes. Slavery built colossal fortunes in the American South, fueled industries in the North and Britain, the textiles, banking, and insurance, and drove early global capitalism. Sugar, tobacco, and cotton were literal cash crops grown on blood and bondage. Profit was the primary driver, with racism developing later to justify the economic exploitation. To an extent, yes.
Yeah.
That's all true. Let's talk about this next theory, though.
All right. So on a deeper, more psychological level, you have the theory of the human capacity for objectification and evil. So this one is pretty much slavery exposes humanity's terrifying ability to dehumanize and objectify others. Philosopher Hannah Arendt's concept of the evil suggests that great horrors often arise not from cartoonish monsters, but from ordinary people accepting and normalizing evil systems through routine, bureaucracy, and distancing themselves from the human consequences of their actions or investments. Slavery became normalized, a cold business transaction, a social norm.
It did become normalized.
It really did become normalized.
Yeah. So that theory is also true.
And the fact that people can dehumanize somebody else and treat them like an object like that.
I don't get it.
I don't get it. I don't know how you can freaking live with yourself doing that.
Nope. So our next theory is called nature of exploitation. This theory views slavery not as a historical anomaly, but as a recurring pattern in human societies wherever extreme inequality, vulnerability, and lack of accountability exists. It argues that the impulse to dominate and exploit others for gain persists, manifesting today in forms like human trafficking, forced labor in global supply chains, debt bondage, and forced marriages. Slavery is not just ancient history, it adapts and endures. I agree. That's all true as well.
I mean, honestly, it's just like racism.
Yeah. In our In our premium episode today, which we covered the Ku Klux Klan,
the KKK possibly never really disbanded or whatever. They just kind of adapted to the times and
they wear suits now, not robes.
They blend in.
Yeah.
All right. So our last theory, though, is called inertia and entrenched with power. Once established, the system became self-sustaining. Vast fortunes were built on it. Entire regional economies and ways of life depended on it. Political power structures were designed around it. Social status and identity were intertwined with it, 100%. Challenging it meant overturning an entire entrenched world, a prospect that seemed to economically catastrophic and socially terrifying to those who benefited. The perceived cost of dismantling it felt higher than the moral cost of maintaining it. I mean, yeah, wealth and like power, the social status was so intertwined with slavery. The more slaves you had, the richer you were, the more power you had.
Yeah. All of those theories are true.
All of them are true, just like the premium.
Yeah.
All these theories work with it. They honestly 100% true.
Yeah. And there are a few other things I want to talk about before we roll this episode out. During my research, I began to look up basically the slave markets and past, what is it called? Documentation. Any documents that showed what companies benefited from slaves, insurance companies, purchasing slaves, insuring them, all of that. I found some documents, but a lot of them were, it looked like redacted almost. And then some of them were just not even included. Like they were erased or thrown away or hid by these corporations that exist today that profited back then on slavery. It is terrifying and just shows you how evil corporations are overall. They don't care about you. They just care about money.
When you got the money, you can hide stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because you could buy politicians and all that, just like the KKK.
Yep, exactly. Which is our premium episode today. Go check it out if you want to. No pressure.
Very informative.
Yep. But with that being said, that is the end of our episode today, which is, of course, slavery. We wanted to do this episode today because of June 19th, the end of slavery, and kind of give you all knowledge over the history of slavery and some strange facts about it that you can sit down at the dinner table and talk to your grandmother about.
Honestly, I was a little worried with these topics, but the more I read into them, the more I got informed of how things were back then. And honestly, I think it's a very informative episode.
It is.
It's not, granted, these topics are, negative, kind of say, but it's good to be like informed on how things happened and how they were.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes kind of like how they are still.
Yep.
Hidden, at least.
And with that being said, that is the end of today's episode. And now we are going to go into free talk, which we're not going to talk about slavery. We're just going to talk about...
Because I don't want to talk about my shirt factory.
Dan has a shirt factory. He has little children make his shirts at.
That's why you haven't got your damn merch yet.
Our shirt factory got shut down.
No, we should
a long time ago.
Should be having all those sent out here soon.
Yeah, we just had a supply chain issue.
I mean, yeah, 2 good episodes this week. Very informative. But on the free talk.
You bought a new gun? Dan bought a new gun?
I bought a new gun. You bought a new gun.
I bought a new gun too. I bought a Beretta M9 pistol.
Very nice.
It's a nice gun. I got it for a good price too. I saw it and I was like, oh, I cannot skip that.
Made me feel better because I was the same exact way with mine.
Tell them what gun you bought.
I bought a Canik Rival SFX.
Yeah.
I am in love with that thing.
But before we purchased these guns, we decided to go to the shooting range. And I had a Glock, or I have a Glock 26. 26 subcompact.
Yeah, you have a Glock 26 subcompact.
Yeah, G26, yeah. And I was like, I'm going to go shoot a few rounds. And Dan brought his pistol.
How it started, though, was last week when Aaron came over to record, I was like, oh, I have something for you. I brought up friggin' the questionnaire and release to go to a gun range. And I was just like, we're going to go shoot guns. Because we have conceals and we haven't shot them in a while. Me, I haven't shot mine since I got my eye surgery, so.
Yeah, it's been years since I shot mine. So I was like, might as well.
Yeah, might as well.
So we went to the range and filled out all the paperwork and got in our little area. What is it? Lane?
Yeah, our own lane.
And I was shooting, and I had this tryhard next to me in the lane, and my casings when I would shoot would go up and over. So there was this barrier, it would go over the barrier and was hitting the guy. And he turns to the range instructor or safety officer and goes, "I'm getting rained on over here. I'm getting rained on."
Okay, just to
I
say,
can't control the casings.
the tryhard, he had one gun with at least 20 magazines already all preloaded and everything, just waiting to be used. And he had his little target. He circled the areas where he was going to shoot for each magazine. He was all decked out. He was ready to go. Shorter than me. He was short manpower.
He was trying hard, and then he was like, "I'm getting rained on over here." And then he looked at me and he looked at the range officer and was like, "Can I just change lanes?" The range officer was like, No. And then he told me just to take one step back, and that will stop my casings from going up and over. And the guy looked at me and just kind of stared at me, and I just kind of stared at him, the guy next to me. I was like, "What are you going to do? Shoot me? I can't control my casings."
I got rained on by the guy next to me to my left.
Yeah.
It happens. I mean,
Can't control the casings, but it was fun. We went twice, and yeah.
pretty cheap. We found ammo cheap too, so we
Yeah.
could shoot those.
But I still have to shoot my Beretta. I shot my Glock. I didn't have my Beretta when we went to the range.
I was able to shoot my Canic. Love it. That thing is nice. But yeah, that was pretty much my spoiling myself for the year, pretty much.
Yeah, that was my birthday present to myself.
But I mean, honestly, it's something I've been wanting to do again. Go back to the range because I used to do it a lot back in Virginia, and I didn't know that we had a range so close to us. So it's nice. Wish we could just go out to some like public land and just shoot, or private land and shoot.
Yeah. You figured we could shoot behind my house. It's got that big ass hill.
I mean, technically, yes.
Cops would be called, though.
Cops would be
There's
called.
freaking hoodlums riding their four-wheelers around the other day
Dude,
on the streets.
living in an HOA, I never felt more Karen in my life because they have all these strict rules, and then all of a sudden, when people don't follow the rules and stuff, but they enforce it on us, I just want to complain.
Yeah. I think that's what they do. It creates all of us into Karens.
Yeah, because they were riding at like 8 or 9 at night too.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you got the road behind me. Now the cops are patrolling it way more because I don't know what happened. It's just like this summer, people are racing up and down the road.
Bad.
Like, it's bad. And like cops are patrolling it, but they're pulling everybody else over for everything else other than racing.
Yeah.
People's cars are getting broken into and all that, but nope, let's not bother that.
Getting broken into at freaking Planet Fitness.
Yeah, I'm afraid to go leave my vehicle there now.
Yeah.
So pretty much you got to empty out your vehicle before you go to work out.
Mm-hmm.
It's dumb.
Anyway, you got anything else you want to talk about before we roll this episode out?
I did get a hold of some Final Fantasy cards. I did open those packs I got.
Did you get anything good?
I got a green traveling chocobo, which is about $30. That's it.
It's pretty good.
Not bad. So I mean, the cards are nice, and I look forward to trying to make a deck out of it. I know you've been playing on MTG Arena.
I hate the Chocobo or whatever the fuck they're called. The green decks, I hate those.
They ramp up fast, and I pulled a couple green cards that seemed to be pretty OP. I'm just like, I can see why you hate them now.
Yeah.
A lot of landfall stuff, and they get powered up by landfall.
Very quickly.
The Final Fantasy cards are being like sold out so fast, especially the collector's ones, which I could not afford at all. Because I think they were selling for like $600 or $700 a box, and then scalpers would buy them and then they resell them.
I hate the scalpers.
I mean, this week we are going to try to go see 28 Years Later.
Yep. We're going to go see that today, actually, Thursday, when y'all are listening to this. Thursday night, we're going to go see it at Alamo Draft House.
Hopefully it's good.
Yeah. Also, I purchased a new book. I'm about halfway through it. A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn.
Okay.
It's extremely informative. It tells the story of Christopher Columbus and his journal entries and diary entries and ship log entries and what he's saying about the people, the Arawak people. Oh, God, he's such a piece of shit. I don't know why we celebrate Columbus Day.
He is honestly a real piece of work,
Yeah.
especially when you actually read about him, his logs and everything.
I highly suggest anyone that hasn't read that book to go get it and read it. I got it off Amazon for like $9. Super good.
I bought a book for the KKK,
For a premium episode.
for the premium episode, to read about the history of them because I wanted to know more about it before talking about it. And the book I got's actually really, really good. It's like rated really high with actual factual stuff on the KKK. I don't know. I felt bad buying it though, even though it's just history on it.
To feel like you're supporting something you're not supposed to be supporting.
Yeah. But I mean, it talks about all the bad stuff, the KKK stuff, like they did and everything. So it's not actually going to them.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, go check out our premium episode if you want to. If not a big deal. We just thank you for listening to us and thank you for your support and love. You mean a lot to us.
That's right. Much love.
We love you and we are proud of you. And with that being said, Dan, would you like to roll us out?
Sure will. It's okay to be out of this world with your thoughts.
Because you are not alone.
Boom.